On the first day, they celebrated the Primarch's return with a statue 3 stories high. It came from off-world, crafted by the master architect priests of the shrine world of Xandu. None could doubt its magnificence. The shoulders of the armor of fate were huge slabs of solid stone, inlaid with the ultima of the Ultramarines. The Emperor's sword was outstretched aloft. Immobile flames licked at the noxious sky. The hand of Dominion reached out for worlds to conquer and reconquer. The forehead was wide, the hairline was neat and short. The eyes were set in stone, unblinking against the horror. The statue Guilliman towered over all, and Rel was happy to toil in its shadow. The overseers told Rel and his fellows that today they would work an extra hour to honor the crusade Indomitus. Rel felt pride in his heart and worked as hard as he was able. As he dragged the plow across the field with 6 other men, he imagined 1,000 warships launching into the black and carrying the angels of death. When the 9th hour came, he knew the pain in his shoulders was a holy pain, for he toiled for the Emperor and his son, and once more the galaxy belonged to his people. That evening, exhausted but happy, Rel listened to the priests singing of the Primarch's return and of a new era for humankind. On the second day, the overseers told Rel and his fellows that the extra hour of toil was now set in stone. They spoke of the Indomitus, of the million soldiers of the Astra Militarum. The soldiers were doing their bit, they said. Rel and his fellows had to do the same, they said. And so they would work an extra hour and find joy within their toil. Rel thought this was fair and worked as hard as he was able. As he dragged the plow across the field with 6 other men, he thought how lucky he was to labor under the shadow of the statue Guilliman. Soldiers were fighting the Xenos and the traitor, dying to save the galaxy from the apocalypse. They needed food, and Rel was happy to do his part. That evening, exhausted but happy, Rel listened to the priests singing of the Primarch's return and of a new era for humankind. On the 14th day, the overseers told Rel and his fellows that their work was not enough. They spoke of deficits and sloth and chastised the workers for taking breaks to piss and sweat. Soldiers were fighting and dying, they said, and did not take breaks upon the battlefield. The farms were Rel's battlefield, they said. Rel and his fellows had to be soldiers too, for the Indomitus starts at home. Rel felt guilty and worked as hard as he was able. He dragged the plow across the field with 6 other men. He ignored the sweat pouring down his back and the pressure upon his bladder. When the 8th hour came, he urinated and imagined that the urine was the blood of martyrs watering the fields of the Imperium. That evening, exhausted, Rel fell asleep to the priests singing of the Primarch's return and of a new era for humankind. On the 21st day, the overseers told Rel and his fellows that they would toil for another 2 hours each day. They spoke of duty and sacrifice, and when Rel's friend Maxim complained, Maxim was dragged away and shot under the statue Guilliman's shadow. Soldiers were conquering worlds, they said. Soldiers were banishing the spectre of chaos, they said. And traitors would not be tolerated, whether on the fields of battle or upon the fields of toil. Rel felt fear and worked as hard as he was able. As he dragged the plow across the field with 6 other men, he shuddered to remember Maxim's screams and the echo of the gunshot that ended his life forever. When the 13th hour came, he collapsed in a puddle of sweat and urine, but picked himself up again. That evening, exhausted, Rel fell asleep to the priest's singing of the Primarch's return and of a new era for humankind. On the 23rd day, the overseers told Rel and his fellows that they would sleep in church no more. They spoke of piety and faith and condemned the sleep as blasphemy. The avenging sun had returned, they said. It was an age of miracles, they said. Only the damned would not care to listen, and the damned would be hanged from the statue Guilliman's burning sword. Rel felt resentful, but worked as hard as he was able. As he dragged the plough across the field with 6 other men, he thought of the pain in his shoulders and his back, and the way the sweat mixed with urine in the folds of his pants. When the 11th hour came, and his friend Coram fell, Rel helped him stand, and took Coram's weight upon his shoulders. That evening, exhausted, Rel drove nails into his palms, and remained awake for the priest's singing of the Primarch's return, and of a new era for humankind. On the 35th day, the overseers told Rel and his fellows that they would toil for another 3 hours each day. They spoke of necessity and of the freedom that the work did bring, and when other farmers threw rocks and mud, they shot back with hollow-point bullets. Soldiers were dying in their billions, they said. The dead were martyrs, they said. Traitors would not be tolerated and would not be missed. Rel felt terror and worked as hard as he was able. As he dragged the plough across the field with 6 other men, he slipped in Coram's blood and in the blood of his fellows, and dreamed of violence and vengeance. When the 15th hour came, he fell and was unable to stand. The overseers brought him before the statue Guilliman and gave him 3 lashes, each stripping the skin from his back. That evening, agonized and bleeding, Rel stared with hate at the priests singing of the Primarch's return and of a new era for humankind. On the 36th day, the overseers hanged Rel's neighbors from the statue Guilliman's burning sword. They spoke of vigilance and safety, and of the rewards that were coming for the loyal and the just. The Indomitus had retaken many worlds, they said. It was a glorious new moment for the Imperium, they said. Everyone who lived in such times was blessed and had no reason to complain. Rel felt nothing and did not work as hard as he was able. As he dragged the plough across the field with 6 other men, he spoke of violence and vengeance and stoked rebellion among his fellows. When the 8th hour came, Rel and his fellows dragged the overseers down into the dirt and suffocated them in the mud. They took their weapons and turned them on the others and added their corpses to the crop. That evening, exultant and certain, Rel helped murder the priests with rakes and sickles and sang of a new era for humankind. On the 37th day, the overseers were corpses picked eyeless by carrion birds. They putrefied into the muddy earth, releasing nutrients into the soil. Soldiers were dying in their billions for an empire that did not care, they seemed to say. The Imperium's re-expansion was built upon their bones, they seemed to say. Their bones and the laughter of thirsting gods. Rel felt content and ate his fill from the grain stores, Made sick a satiation overwhelmed starvation flesh. He helped burn the plows in the muddy fields and chanted slogans about his rights and hunger's death. When the 8th hour came and Rel was tired, he slept in his bed and dreamed of a brighter future. That evening, refreshed and happy, Rel told the others of what he had dreamed, and together they sang of a new era for humankind. On the 38th day, the overseers came with tanks and machine guns and killed everyone they found. They spoke of zero tolerance and justice, and of heresy and betrayal. Soldiers were dying in their billions, they said. Every one of the workers had spat on their sacrifice, they said. It was the 42nd millennium, and every one of them had to die. Rel escaped their bullets and their shock mauls, and fled into the fertilizer wastes beyond. As he fell in a field with a head fogged with fumes, he listened to the screams of the tortured and the dying. When the 7th hour came and the overseers were done, the dead stench rose in clouds of ash and fell on Rel as desiccated rain. That evening, dying and alone, Rel listened to distant priests singing of the Primarch's return and of a new era for humankind. On the 39th day, the overseers brought new laborers and piled the ash bodies of the dead before the statue Guilliman's feet. They spoke of consequences and order, and of the Emperor's divine vision. The Indomitus had retaken many worlds, they said. Many worlds were barren and hungry, they said. The farmers were the lucky ones, for they did not fight, and yet were fed. Rel choked on fumes of poison fertilizer and continued to die. He wept tears for the future that died along with him, and knew that hunger would live after all. As the hours passed, unmarked and unnumbered, his lips became crusted and parched. That evening, dying and alone, Rel shut out the song of the distant priests and fell into a fevered sleep of death. On the 40th day, the Cyclops counted the 777 variants of focal encephalitis. On the 41st day, the Cyclops counted the 777 variants of chronic respiratory infection. On the 42nd day, the Cyclops counted the 777 variants of the rot and offered Rel a choice. On the 43rd day, the overseers found Rel stumbling toward the fields and dragged him away in chains. They asked him many questions, applying screws to desiccated fingers. Traitors were dying in their billions, they said. They were eradicated from within and without, they said. It was the 42nd millennium, and the Dark Imperium was ascendant under the avenging sun. Rel felt no pain and did not answer their questions. 1,000 galaxies died in the echoes of his atrophied mind. When the 7th hour came and the sickness had taken the overseers, Rel shucked off his shackles and found the door unlocked. That evening, alive and content, Rel listened to the priests begging for the Primarch's help and for the salvation of humankind. On the 49th day, only Rel and his new fellows were still alive. They spoke of the compassion of rot and of the eternal cycle of death and rebirth. Billions toiled for an emperor that was dead, they said. Only those embracing the eternal cycle were saved, they said. They were free from the slavery that had chained their parents and their grandparents and their great-grandparents and their great-great-grandparents for 10 millennia past. Rel felt no angst, and collected up the stubborn dead with 6 other men. They piled the corpses in 3 great rings before the statue Guilliman, and danced the Maypole in the center of each. When the 7th hour came, and they were still not tired, they continued to dance, and laughed without hunger or fear. That evening, filled with the glory of the eternal cycle, Rel oversaw the hanging of dead priests from the statue Guilliman's burning sword, and sang of a new era for humankind. On the 70th day, the overseers returned with tanks and machine guns, wearing masks and hazmat suits. They spoke of fire and repopulation, and of necessity and tithes. The Indomitus was a starving monster, they said. Everyone would die if the tithe was not met, they said. They would burn and rebuild, for the alternative was death. Rel felt joyful and pretended at death in the field along with his fellows. When the 7th hour came and the sickness spread through masks and hazmat suits, Rel rose and joined the cavorting of death. That evening, empowered and happy, Rel told the surviving overseers that the Primarch would not save them, and offered them a new era for humankind. On the 77th day, the overseers told the authorities that the fields were ready and asked for new workers to tend them. They spoke of expansion, of greater numbers and productions. The Primarch had returned, they said. It was a time of wonders, they said. All were welcome beneath the statue's shadow. Rel felt joyful and embraced the new arrivals of his fellows. Many screamed and moaned, but he heard only laughter and joy. When the 7th hour came and the sickness spread, Rel took the stubborn dead to the statue Guilliman and the 3 great rings beneath. That evening, overcome with love and faith, Rel and his fellows made offerings to the grandfather beneath the statue Guilliman, and sang of a new era for humankind. Over the many days that followed, they watched the cracks form in the armor of fate. They saw the Emperor's sword bend beneath the weight of the bloated priests, and the hand of Dominion shatter into pieces. The forehead was wide, the hairline was neat and short. All was overtaken by rot. The eyes were set in stone, molding and crumbling. Rel sang of the Primarch's return to death and of a new era for humankind. And when the dead walked, the statue fell, and the cycle began anew.
Thank you for listening to this video from the Archive Tower. If you enjoyed this story, please like and subscribe to the channel.